get knocked down, but you gotta get up. Keep going.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Sovereign CEO podcast. I have with me today Dr. Laura Foster. Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Carla. Thanks for asking me to come here. Divine timing. It finally worked out. Here we are.
Yeah, we've been trying to make it happen for a while. I have Bush internet, you have Costa Rica internet, and sometimes that just doesn't it doesn't align.
True story. Understatement.
So I sent you a message recently. I'd been following your content. I really love your memes and how you infuse humor with like the sweetness and wisdom. And I just sent you a DM one day, and I was like, we should probably be friends. I know we have the same friends. Do you want to be friends? Do you want to go on the show? Like let's just start this friendship thing now." And you're like, "Yeah, let's do it."
Well, that is the truth of it. This is one of the beautiful things about being on social is you get to test drive people, right? You can be like, oh, kind of
Yeah.
come into their world a little bit. You see what they're about. And yeah, it's true. We have lots of mutual friends, and I feel like we have lots of similar values. And so here we are. And I'm Canadian, even though I'm living in Costa Rica, I still really resonate with those who walk the line of really strong Canadians.
Mm. And I don't know about you, it's a little different now in like forming relationships. There are just people that I would be more ballsy with now in this time and space, and people that I trust like instantly if I know that they share some of these similar values. Like I went to an event recently and total strangers were messaging me like, "Oh, do you need a ride? I'll pick you up from the airport. You could stay at my house." And my husband Dan was like, "Isn't that weird?" And I was like, no, no, not at all. Not after what we went through the last 4 years. Knowing that they're on the same page, I like pretty much fully trust these people. Like no problem whatsoever. It's
Well,
just different now.
when the temperature turns up, we become more of who we are. We really do. It's like being in that pressure cooker of these last few years and in various ways for various people. But being under that, what ends up rising to the top is the things that matter to you most. And so we start responding, and this is kind of where it's been so heated, is we start responding in the truth of who we are, whether we like it or not. And that's the good thing, because, a lot of stuff fell away for people where they're like, well, I guess I'm no longer pretending I'm that person anymore, like the veil of it all, which I think is why for some people, they looked around their life and they were like, I don't actually have any real friends anymore, or my family isn't in alignment with me and I can't ignore it any longer. But the side of it is if you were pretty good at living your life aligned and you were already living your life out loud, it was really easy to see the people that match that for you. So I don't know, it was really easy. It's like everybody was going around with their freak flag. It was like, this is the color of my freak flag. And so
Yes.
once you see that in somebody else, you're like, okay, I implicitly trust that because I know we have some shared values. That's what it
Yes.
was for me. Yeah.
Yeah, Megan Teltner and I were talking about this. It was really just the great amplifier. So
Mm.
the good people got even better, the bad people got even worse, and also some people that you maybe thought were good or thought were bad, everything got flipped on its head because just people's actual qualities were amplified.
For sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Megan's intelligent. I love having conversations with her. Her wisdom just ripples out in that unique, artistic, bright way that she is.
Yes. She actually used to go to kids camp here where I live on Lake of the Woods, which is really neat too. So we've
Oh,
been like really close to each other's world before ever meeting. There's so many funny like synchronicities with that kind of stuff too.
that's wild. I love it.
Yeah. So for people that don't know you, you've been a chiropractor for almost 3 decades now. You closed your practice so that you could go all in on your coaching business. You are a Canadian, but you have since left Canada.
Mhm.
For folks that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a melting pot of all my favorite things. And I will say, my official title for so many years was chiropractor, and I sold my practice and my business in 2019. so that I could go all in on not just the things I wanted to do in my business, but also the things I wanted to do in life. I wanted to move back across the country to British Columbia. And if you're a Canadian and you're listening to this, it's like moving from the east side of Canada and moving to the west side is like moving to another world. And for me, it was moving home. So that was one of the reasons why I did it. And, you know, as much as I loved to do that work at that time, moving and selling my business and stepping into the coaching business that I'm doing now was really amplifying the things that were coming to the surface for me the most at that time. So I did this work where I was a chiropractor, loved it, like did it in a really big way that was really indicative of my personality. And then when it was time to kind of move out of that, I kind of did it as gracefully as I could, but I feel like I was holding on to the sides of the doors and my heels were to the ground a little bit. But once I kind of made my way through that, then I went all in on coaching. So I work one-to-one with humans who really want to know who they are and why it matters. I do personal leadership coaching. And a lot of times it is online, but it also shows up in the form of one-to-one personal retreats down here in Costa Rica or group retreats. And then I also have this place where I do have a boutique practice down here in Costa Rica. I get to practice in, 10 feet by 15 feet, which is such a deviation from the way I used to practice. And it's been really lovely to just really see, like, who am I right here, right now? And how can I continue to bring forth this work that I love to do for so many years in the expression that I am right now? So it's the same, and yet it's also different. And then also I'm teaching yoga and doing breath work and, all that kind of stuff, like making really beautiful cups of coffee and meeting people from all over the world. So that is the more or the less of what I do down here now.
I've heard you make a mean cup of coffee, that's like your thing, your ritual.
I do. I mean, it only needs to matter to me, quite honestly, because I don't sell cups of coffee, but I'm known for it. I love to do it. And it's quite funny because most of my friends are not coffee drinkers. So there you go. So if you are are you a coffee drinker, Carla?
I'm mega addicted. And here's the thing, I need the better cup because what I find is if I'm drinking crappy coffee, like if I just brew it, I keep drinking it all day long. Like it becomes this savage addiction. But if I have one really good, like let's say I make a latte,
Right.
I'm not going to just keep drinking lattes all day. So this morning actually was the first morning where I know every now and then this happens. I'm like, nope, break it. You're in the cycle again. So I had matcha this morning and then I didn't actually have a latte until like 11. Now I know that I'm good. But I get sucked into these like caffeine pits every now and then,
Yeah.
especially when it's like a busy work season. But it's weird. It's the bad coffee that gets me addicted. I
True.
don't know why.
I think that's why, back when I was fully practicing chiropractic and running programs on health and wellness a lot, that was actually one of my things. It was like, get yourself the best mug, make the best cup of coffee you can, craft it and curate it to the highest quality you can, spend an obscene amount of money getting the best ingredients that you can to make your coffee, and then enjoy that fucking coffee and make sure you're not doing anything else that you don't want to be doing while you drink that coffee. And that's how you drink one large, perhaps, but one cup of coffee a day. It's the consciousness to it all. So I can appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, I just like being addicted to things. And it's crazy how hard it actually is to break an addiction. Like how hard it was actually to have matcha this morning instead of coffee. I was like, you can do it. Because it's not like the normal thing. It's such a strange, powerful addiction.
I think we all have those things in various ways, right? Yours might be matcha together with the coffee situation, and then other people, it shows up in other things. But everybody can relate to that slow, slippery slide into something that's not really serving them, but they're like, it's what I do. It feels comfortable over here in this discomfort, over-caffeinated haze of jitteriness. It feels good. I know this one.
Yeah. So, would you consider yourself lucky that you had closed your practice before all this nonsense hit? I mean, that must have been a really big decision. Like I chose to close my studio, but I was also kind of pushed, right? I didn't have to. I could have hung on to that thing, but it was a no-brainer for me to close it after trying to fight for it for 18 months, and I chose to walk away, and it ended up being a really good decision. But did you feel like you dodged a huge bullet closing up your practice before all this hit?
Um, well, yeah, I'm not actually sure how that would have ran for me. So just to give some context to this, that practice is, next to 25 years old. And I had several other chiropractors working with me, one of which had been with me for 16 years. And it was always our knowing that she was going to purchase the practice and the business from me at some point into the future. But my idea was, I'm just gonna, like, I was a single mom at the time, I was dating seriously, but I still, had my own house and had my kids and taking care of business, so to speak. And so I felt very connected to the fact that this was something that I loved to do, but it no longer felt right. And it was like such an uncomfortable truth to know that. But here's the part where I kept listening to it consciously. In 2018, actually, is when it started. I could start to feel the pull. Like when I would go to the back door of the clinic and I went to open the door, it was like I had to take a deep breath in and stick the key in the lock. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. Like I never used to do that. Or I'd come up to my schedule and I'd be like, oh, I'd take a deep breath. Even though it was like beautiful and abundant and so on, I could just notice there was these pieces of me that were like, I don't know, there was a bit of a burden that I was carrying with it. It was like Monday was like a bit of like picking the rock up and like starting to move it up the hill. And I had never really had that before. So I knew that something needed to change, but on paper, it didn't seem like the right time. I was like, if I could just only love this for 10 more years, I mean, this would be perfect because financially and all the things there, everything else would just be like, it'd be fun if I did this, as opposed to I still feel like I kind of needed to. But as life has it, there's that push, right? You can feel it, or maybe it's a pull. I don't know. I was feeling pulled and I was feeling pushed at the same time. And we rolled the sale. I actually sold my business in February of 2019 to my associate, long-term associate. And that clinic is still running today. All is well. But for
Awesome.
me, I made the transition, and how I made the transition is we actually flipped positions. She bought everything, and then I became her associate and she became my boss, which was kind of fun and cool in theory. But I realized it's difficult for me to work for other people.
Same.
Even though conceivably it was the same old, everybody was the same, and I was still seeing my same patients. But this is the thing about it, is that there was a bigger picture ahead and I couldn't see it, but I could feel it in my body. And so, I was going to stay for a couple more years. And then as the summer went on in 2019, it was like, okay, I'm going to stay a year for sure. And then I was like, 8 months, I've got 8 months in me. And then, it was so uncomfortable, and I wanted to be of the highest integrity and just really leave there in this beautiful kind of graceful dance out the door and have my associate, who I love deeply, just, her stand in all of that. And yet at the same time, I could feel it. And so bless her heart, I went to her in October, September, something like that. And I said, how do you feel about me being done on December 23rd? And she was just really trusting in the whole thing. And she said, anything, absolutely, 100%, whatever you want. So I sailed out the door December 23rd, January 1st, January 2nd, I went to Spain and I did my yoga teacher training, something I wanted to bring back into my life in a bigger way. And then, the writing was on the wall, beginning of March, middle of March, and so on. And, I could really see that there was very much divine intervention for me, because as things heated up right away, I'd always been someone who spoke very candidly about health and healing, real health, real healing, holistic, full body, non-pharma-based healing. And soon as things started to roll out, it took me about 10 days before I 100% fully and completely could see exactly where this was going. And, iPhones are really great. And, that ability to kind of go live is really awesome. But I definitely came out loud and proud at the beginning. People, it definitely made people very nervous just to speak about, maybe the logic of what was going on or the illogical moves that we were making as a society and what I was worried about. I very quickly started talking about vaccine mandates and all of these things, because being in that world for so long, I had seen how this was all ramping up behind the scenes in really small ways and big ways. As a practitioner for all of those years, I used to speak about informed consent and vaccines for years and years and years until I started getting visits from people in suits, years ago. And then it became illegal for chiropractors to even speak about vaccines. And I was never against vaccines, but I was definitely for informed consent. And so, I did what every other, freedom-loving person do. I went from speaking about it on the stage to putting the stage underground and speaking underground about it. Yeah. So for me, I could see for many, many years, like this growing presence of pharma. And then at the same time, this pressure on our profession, the chiropractic profession, which is the biggest profession outside of medical doctors, one that holds a very different philosophy. And because chiropractors are often very passionate about not just the science and the art, but the philosophy of natural health, this was a place where we started to see a lot of pressure in on our regulatory boards. The regulatory boards started putting a lot of pressure on chiropractors, to the point where when the mandates hit way back in March of 2020, chiropractors were already told, you can't speak about this, you can't talk about natural health supplements, you can't recommend vitamin D, you can't tell people to eat well, nothing. And so it's a bigger question what you're just asking, but it came down to, for me, I was like, right then and there, I was like, I am retiring my fully paid license. It's already paid for a full year. I am retiring it right today in this moment, so that I can start to speak about the things that I know the thousands of other chiropractors and other healthcare practitioners in Canada couldn't speak about. And I remember when I contacted my regulatory board and said, I want to retire my license, she said, well, you're fully paid up till December 31st. And I said, no, I would like it retired today. She's like, well, I can't retire it today, but I can retire it on Monday. I said, what do I need to say with all the love in the world for you to retire my license today? Because already these videos that I was producing, putting out into the world, were getting 10,000 and 15,000 views. And yeah, so, am I happy? I feel very guided, because listen, I wasn't a mask wearer. I was all about the personal sovereignty of it all. There just isn't any way that I could have done that in practice. I couldn't have put up a piece of plexiglass between us. I couldn't have turned away from patients that I had been seeing for 20 plus years. It just wouldn't have worked for me. And so I definitely would have had a much more volatile role if I had been a clinic owner at that time, and feeling the weight and the responsibility of all the other practitioners who are working for me. So if I had come out in my philosophy, which you think you're all really aligned, but then again, you get back into that pressure cookie situation, and some people are like, I'm just going to toe the line a little. I just need to toe the line a lot. And there's no shame about any of that. But the reality is, for me, I was like, it's a freaking hard no. Like, it's a hard no. I cannot in any way, shape, or form live outside my values right now. And so not being in practice was beautiful for me, because it allowed me to, align with that without feeling like I was crumbling a lot of other people's, worlds, I guess you could say. I could just really do it for me. And I know that feeling of like, I need to do it now. I need to do it now. No, I need to do it earlier. No, I need to, really move outside of my business on December 23rd, 2019. That was not by chance. I was led.
It's interesting because you didn't change. You didn't move. Like, your values didn't change. Like you said, this is a natural healing modality. And because I've been curious this whole time, watching people like you and Dr. Seth Gerlach and Dr. Tina. There's like all these chiropractors. They were the ones that were speaking out. And I was like, I was just so curious about why the chiropractors I didn't really see this with the physios, didn't really see this with the nurses and doctors. Saw them coming out, not everybody, but like a lot of chiropractors were speaking up against this. And it's
I can tell
interesting.
you why.
Yeah, tell me.
I can tell you why. It's because being a chiropractor, maybe not today, where chiropractic is way more mainstream, but when I started to be a chiropractor 30 years ago, you were already weird. You know, like I'm not weird, but the point is that you were already, by
Outside the
making that
box.
choice, you were outside the box. And, you know, even though I was proud to be a chiropractor, it's not like I got a lot of accolades. You know, I'd go to the party, my husband was a pilot and I was a chiropractor. And so we'd go to a party and someone would say, "Oh, what do you do?" "I'm a chiropractor." And they go, or they go, "I don't believe in chiropractic." Or they'd say, my sister's brother's uncle's best friend's dog's whatever was killed by a chiropractor. This is literally how it used to go. And then my husband would go, I'm a pilot. And they go, "Oh my God, you're a pilot. That's so great." And that's like kind of how it was. And so there was this place where I just had to get really sovereign in myself and know like why I'm a chiropractor. And
Well,
obviously,
wait, can you snap next? Because I am building an apocalypse team, so I need to know about whatever super skills you have.
oh, I can definitely help you. Don't worry. But in terms of like this thing that followed for a long time, it's like, oh, the danger
Yeah.
of chiropractic. And listen, chiropractic has a history with the medical profession. A lot of people don't know this, but there was a massive, giant lawsuit many, many years ago that I think came to fruition 1993, 4, somewhere in there when I was in school. I'm just dating myself there. And it was the American Medical Association against the entire chiropractic profession. And the chiropractors won because there was a very obvious, intentional, orchestrated agenda to ruin the chiropractic profession. And chiropractors won. And as a result, they had to give money, tons of money to the chiropractic profession, all of it. But one of the terms of it was that chiropractors couldn't talk about it. So you couldn't like go on and say like, this is what the American Medical Association has done and so on. So there's this place where like chiropractors were jailed for like practicing medicine without a license. Like there is a strong history in chiropractic of people going against the grain and like having that ability to say like, this is what matters and this is the truth of it. And I'm standing up because it's what's right. Other professions don't necessarily have that history. And maybe new chiropractors right now, they get taught that and all that. But until you like come through it, it's kind of like you could talk about the last 4 years or you could have lived the last 4 years. It's different. That pressure, it polishes you. And so there is that vein in chiropractic of like, this is important. Our forefathers, there's a very, very strong philosophy in chiropractic, and it comes back to understanding and knowing where this all really roots in from. And I think that's why you see a lot of passionate chiropractors, especially some of us older ones.
Yeah. Do you know where I haven't seen that is in the yoga community? Because you talked about alignment. A lot of the chiropractors are just staying true to who they are and still talking about the things that they always said were important to them. I was really surprised in my industry with all the yoga teachers when the social justice movement really started bubbling up. And I went to all the trainings. I read the anti-racism books, I did all these equity trainings. And then after doing it for a while, I was like, this is not right. This is the exact opposite of everything that we've been teaching. The root of yoga and all great spiritual teachings is that we are equal. We are
Right.
equal. We are the same. This teaches that actually we are not equal. There's actually a hierarchy of privilege and we all need to be treated differently. And also, like, outcome is better than intention. I started just looking around practically and thinking, guys, this is getting much, much worse. Division, racism, hatred, everything is getting worse. Judgment. This is not an industry that's staying true to the roots. And maybe that's because, I ran teacher trainings for years. I put a lot of effort and time and research into it. So we taught the roots where it came from. And maybe a lot of people are going through these trainings actually not learning where it came from, what it's actually about. You're just learning poses or
Postures.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
a little
Well,
fluffier.
I can appreciate exactly what you're saying. And I would say that there's a lot of to what you're saying right there, meaning where it originates from, the foundation of it is really the root that starts to build into what comes out of it. And there's a lot of humans right now who are doing all sorts of trainings. You see it in the naturopath profession, you see it in physiotherapy and so on. It's not rooted in a strong foundation of philosophy. Now, real yoga, you and I know, is rooted in philosophy. The postures are just one tiny little branch of the whole thing. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and nor do they need to. But as teachers, we need to realize that. And so I too was like deeply disappointed by a lot of, I'm not going to call them gurus, but let's just call them people, foundation people who have spoke very openly and taught internationally in the field of yoga. And it was really disappointing, a lot of what came out. And it just, it kind of reinforced to me that it isn't ever about the profession or anything like that. It is about the human. We've seen humans in all sorts of professions and all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of things. It's like your humanity comes out in these times. And I think that's the part. So it's like the guru, whether we're talking about yoga, or we're talking about Hollywood, or we're talking about the music profession, we're talking about any of it. It's really like taking people off of the pedestal and putting them down and being like, what are they showing me about who they are versus what are they saying they are? Because that's really the part where a lot of us right now are looking around going, I don't know why I ever allowed that person to take up space inside of my head as someone that is greater than I. When you really just see they're humans like everybody else. And this is a lot of what's been falling down, as you know. I don't need to speak to this to you about what's been happening. I mean, that's entirely what Hollywood and the music industry and all of that is about, is like, oh, okay, then here we are. Right? Yeah, it is disappointing.
What a better place. And what a easy place to look to see if something actually is aligned. Like I was all for like, okay, let's check out this path. Like I've done shadow work, I've done all this. Like I have no problem being uncomfortable. But again, outcome. Like you thought your work was aligned, but all of a sudden you started noticing like, what's the outcome? I'm starting to like dread turning the key, right?
Yeah.
So it was the same with this stuff too. I was like, I see the intention being good from lots of you, but like, look at the outcome. Like,
Look at the outcome.
How did you know when Canada was no longer aligned for you?
Well, I was feeling the pressure of it, through 2020 and 2021 of just having not been vaccinated. I was living in British Columbia at the time. And so for us, it was that place where it's like, you can go here and you can't go there. You can't leave the country. You can't get on the airplane. You can't do the thing, all that. And, don't get me wrong. I didn't miss eating at restaurants. All of that was fine. But for me, it was openly outside of my values, but I really was envisioning where it was all going. I knew all of this had to be happening in order for us to get clarity on what needs to move and what needs to go. So it was like, when I was in the microcosm of it, I felt stressed. When I backed up and I tried to look at the horizon a lot more, and I looked at the macrocosm, I was like, listen, what we're doing hasn't been working. So let's burn this shit down and move forward. Like I really held on to this belief. It didn't help when our accounts got frozen. When our accounts got frozen as a result of giving twice to the Freedom Convoy.
Your bank accounts, not your social
our bank accounts. No, not my social media account. I'm knock on wood. I'm actually surprised I still have a social media account. But like no, our bank account got frozen. Our corporate bank account got frozen and whatnot. And I mean, that was like one of those things where we were already well aware of how shaky our financial institutions are. This was not new to me. I have been awakening to a lot of this information since 9/11. Like it started like about a year and a half after 9/11 happened. And I started to question it. And then the pressure of like big pharma, and I could start to see this like lobbying becoming so excessive. So I was really open and aware to a lot of things, the education system, the breakdown of a lot of these things. Obviously, it came through eventually, like sipping through a fire hose, but I had had some of that already rising. So it came to a head for us when, we were making what we thought were the best decisions for ourselves. We wanted to stay in Canada. We wanted to see this through. We got the property in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. We were starting to build, doing all the things. I could feed a small nation. We had the wood stove, like so many of the sovereign things. We were diversifying all the stuff. Our accounts get frozen. And it's one of those things where when something happens, or in theory that it can happen, and then it happens, there's like a whole different energy around it. It's kind of like when someone says to me, well, what would you do if some sort of health diagnosis happened to you? I'm like, well, what I think I would do and what I would do would probably be different, because when you're actually in a situation, the energy starts to shift.
Yes.
And we sat in that moment where like, we could stay. We definitely could. And I'm not saying we're going to be down in the tropics forever, but we could stay, and we still have ties and connections to Canada. And at the same time, we were like, I was aware that I was also choosing it. And let me explain this for a second. I have a girlfriend who made the exact same decisions about her health. She lived in Arizona, and her and I have known each other 150 years. And I followed her and I watched her during COVID. And she was having a completely different lived experience than me. Eating out, getting on a plane, doing all the things. And she didn't have fake paperwork or any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
She was just allowed to do that. That was like, okay. And sometimes she wore a mask and most times she didn't. It didn't actually matter. And I was thinking to myself, time is going by. Like my kids all 3 of our 4 kids missed their high school graduation, those kinds of things. It was like, those things didn't happen and it's fine. We're fine. But I was aware to some degree that by being in it, yes, we're choosing it. So I struggled with this. I am a fighter. I have that peace inside of me. And also, what is the most important for me right now? One of our kids was struggling. It wasn't okay. I was deeply afraid. Then our accounts got frozen. It pushed our line. Our values flipped a little. Freedom went ahead, kind of went up. It was one of my top 5 values, but I felt we needed to do it. And that actually was the tipping point for us. Made the decision, decided to move down here. It's been, it's many things, but we're going on our 3rd year down here. And people will say to me all the time, oh, it must be so great down there. Listen, wherever you go, there you are. So it's like, yes, it is, but it's also great in Canada. Canadians are amazing people and our land is potent. And I still care as much about all of it. So I can be here doing everything. I don't care any less than I ever did, because for me, my driving force is I have kids and they're going to have kids. And it matters to me what world we create and we vote for every single day with our decisions. But also at the same time, there were some things that happened by us moving here that opened a door and opened a portal for us that I am so damn grateful for. So it was a good decision for us, very much pushed by the actions of the government. Again, very led. Had our accounts not been frozen, I actually don't think we'd be here. But it was always a possibility, but it was a light possibility. We had other things on the go, but that's kind of how it happened. Not how it happened. That is how it happened at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? This reminds me, like I think this stuff is going to happen everywhere. I don't think that there is a perfect utopia where we can just remove ourselves from globalism and the things that are going to happen. But when I look back on the last 4 years, I don't really feel grief about my business. I used to, but I don't have grief anymore about friends leaving. I do have grief as a mother during that time period, what my kids had to go through. And of course, I was present and of course, I was there with them. But I know that I was not okay during that time and space. And I grieve for that time. Like I could have been a different mother if we were removed. And that when I think about like when the pandemic started with my kids, like how old they were, how old they were and how old they are now, it feels like such a blur,
Yeah.
and that could have been different had we left Canada.
Right. I mean, we only know what we did, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
recently I have been feeling like um, our kids have been choosing to go back to Canada. And so here's
Mm-hmm.
my husband and I were down here. We're like, oh, and
Mm-hmm.
yet, and so I have shown this recent grief about maybe we shouldn't have come down here because now I'm living this reality of being like 7,000 kilometers separated from my kids. And our kids will say all the same thing. What you did for us
Mm-hmm.
absolutely changed our lives. And the truth is what you did for your kids absolutely shaped your kid's life. And I know I say it, I actually even get emotional about it because I understand that. Like every time you say yes to say something, you're saying no to something else.
That's
And
right.
there is such deep, deep trust that has to come from you are being led, you are doing what you need. When I see your socials and I see your kids, you know, being part of the hunt and taking care of the property and doing the things and being so sovereign, I'm like, fuck yeah, Carla. And I'm not saying that, it was always easy or it was always those things, but I can't help but believe that by you following those nudges that you followed at the time, that it wasn't exactly what your kids needed.
Yeah.
You probably
Well, and
share
it's
that
what
on
they
some level.
need or want. Like, and this is the funny thing about like you don't know what you don't know. So to like their friends, their friends think that they have the coolest life because both of my girls have their own boats. They've been driving since they were 10. So they can go anywhere on Lake of the Woods by themselves. In the wintertime, they sled themselves to school. They boat themselves to school. They'll go and pick up their friends and go to the beach. And like they are so free and they have guns and are able to like go hunt. Like they have a lot of adult responsibility. But my girls, when they go to their friend's house in town, in like a crowded suburb in a cul-de-sac, they're like, oh man, this would be so awesome if we just lived here. We could just ride our bikes to our friend's house. I'm like, I get that. And I get why you think like, and it's different. And that would for sure be easy. But the treadways are not living in the world. Mm-mm. And you guys later as adults, I know as adults you're really gonna, and it's not that they complain a lot, they really don't. But I think as adults they'll really get it.
They
Like
will
we're,
get it.
yeah.
They will get it. I mean, I can appreciate that. I go back to Canada because we don't have addresses in Costa Rica, so there's not like even Amazon. So there's no like impulse buying or anything. I went back to Canada for 5 weeks in the fall, and I swore up and down every day I needed something from Amazon. Like the level of
The
convincing I gave
stuff.
my
Yeah.
yes. Jen, I was staying at my friend
Yeah.
Jen's house, and like every day she was like, another package for you. And after a while, I was like, oh my God, Laura, like I don't need a digital
Yep.
thermometer. I'll be okay. I can make steaks on my own. But yet there's always going to be that humanness where we're like, we
Yeah.
reflect and we see other things and we're like, oh, that would be cool. And
Yeah.
think that's such a good part of it because it helps us question ourselves as to why we do what we do, right? One of the things I think that you would be teaching your kids is to be able to live a life that doesn't look like other people. And honestly,
Yeah.
you know this from working with clients, if there was anything that I would say consistently comes up in the work that I do with humans, like 40 years old and above, it's that place where we give ourselves permission to have our life look and feel different than other people. It is
Mm,
amazing. I think we are born that way, and then it kind of gets moved out of us at some point for the average person, and then we spend time later in life trying to get back to the essence of who we are. And yet I think putting your kids through these, what I would call like mini trials and tribulations, this adult responsibility and this kind of harsher way of life, really, if you think about it, it's not easy for them
mm,
to just get up and go across a frozen lake to go to school. Let's be honest with you. It doesn't always feel
mhm.
comfortable. It's not easy. They're having to, have a sense of responsibility, and they're honestly just diligence. That is going to teach them something about who they are that it doesn't come from living in the cul-de-sac. It just
No.
doesn't.
No, and same with traveling. You're giving your kids the experience of meeting all these different people, different cultures. And to be fair, when you live in Canada, you need more stuff. Like, so go get the Amazon stuff. Because when we lived in Nicaragua, we had a suitcase. Because you need a bathing suit and a pineapple. you're good. You don't really need things. There's only one season. You come back to Canada and you're like, I need 18 layers of clothes. There's four seasons. There's the in-between seat. Like we need stuff as soon as we're back
True.
here.
It's true. That is true. There is something about living here that has, kind of brought me back to basics. When you live, I can't talk about it in comparison to Nicaragua, but where I live is wet, wet tropics, very far south in Costa Rica. There is a energy down here of just slowing down. And so you're still built on this timeline of like, we still need to make money. We still need to participate, and we still want to participate in the world, right? So there's this piece where it's like, I'm a driven person. I did not come down here to lay on a lounger in the sun, like I just didn't. And although I do that very occasionally, it's not really who I am. And so I come down here and I'm still the essence of who I've always been, but now I'm in this culture that is so different. So this place where, I've had to really learn to slow the fuck down, for one, and be much more intentional in the way that I work. And I think I've been looking at and really digesting this idea of allowing and surrendering to a level that I never have before, mostly because, I don't know the language here, even though I go to Spanish twice a week and I am trying so hard, but I am apparently not as neuroplastic in my brain as I used to be when I was younger, because it is deeply humbling to learn a second language and be able to communicate in that. But there are these pieces in here where, if you show up for them, you realize that you are constantly being offered this opportunity to put a stake in the ground and say, like, this is who I am. This is why it matters. And this is why I'm showing up to this life. And, for as long as we're going to be here, whatever that is, we're going to keep doing that. But you can always make a decision about life, and then you can make the decision right. We're here right now. It's always what people say, like, are you going to be there forever? I'm like, I don't know. Do you know if you're going to be where you are forever? Like, we just make assumptions about life. But the truth is, just like I was choosing to live in British Columbia under the oppression of what that was at the time, I also could choose something else. And we all actually have that choice, even though it oftentimes feels like we don't. It's not like, yes, I get it. We're all have different metrics. We all have different financials. But even then, we are choosing what we are living in. We are choosing what we're putting up with. We are choosing what we are choosing. And we don't give ourselves, I think, really enough latitude and privilege to be able to just make different choices. It's possible. You probably couldn't have seen what you're doing now back when you were doing something else. Or maybe you could, but like, how were you going to do it? But then when the pressure cooker came, you just did it, because that's what we do. We just rise to the occasion of whatever occasion we're in.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that you always choose to be honest. I was listening to one of your shorter podcasts today about healing, and I love that you are always kind, but you are unapologetically direct. And you started off the podcast saying, we have a lot of healing to do from the trauma of the last few years. And if you're hearing this thinking, get over it, or that wasn't traumatic, well, I'd kindly invite you to turn this podcast off, because it's not for you. And I'm going to continue talking about the subject. And I think that's what we all need to be embracing more. Just honesty. Like, that's not rude. That is not unkind to say what you mean. I love that you just say what you mean, and you're acknowledging that people do need to heal. Like, their surface level okay. That's what that podcast was about, right? Like, people are okay. They're okay. They've gone back to work, but very few people are thriving right now. Tell me more about that.
I was curious when it was all happening, because I wasn't in practice, so I didn't have my finger on the direct pulse of literally having my hands on people and having the privilege of having those conversations. But I could imagine, based on how I was feeling, how a lot of people were feeling. When I opened up a practice about a year ago down in Costa Rica, admittedly, the majority of my patients are expats, but still, I have a good cross section of the community down here. I wasn't prepared for what I experienced when I went back into practice. It wasn't necessarily what was being said. It was It was what was coming through in humans. So to give context, as a chiropractor, I obviously work with the human body. My hands, I do a hands-on practice. I do very gentle, specific work, the type of specific work I do. But one of it is when you've put your hands on thousands and thousands and thousands of people, you can sense things through your hands that is not being said by the spoken word. And so I was not prepared for the level of suppression in humans' bodies. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to say. I suspected it, but last December 2023, when I started to open a practice, put my hands on people, I had to really take it in. You know, it was exactly what I expected, but more. And that got me thinking, because I was already working with humans, coaching and in retreats. So I knew just from the speaking and the way that we move through life, I could see it, but to really, really acknowledge it on a deeper level. So for many of us, I'm just going to make a blanket statement. Yeah, we manage, we do for sure. And yet life is cumulative. So all these experiences that we have, if we don't process them, and we have these unprocessed pieces that exist in our life, it settles into our being. And we live our life through this. And it's one of the reasons why I also love breath work so much, because we want to talk about the things, and there's great, you know, we're talking about it right now. There's so many ways to move energy. One of them is talking it through, but we really over identifying with talking about things. And sometimes when you talk about things, what you end up doing is you just keep putting it back into the field, right? It's that vibration just keeps going back. And what we want to do is we want to get underneath these pieces that we haven't acknowledged. Pandemic and way before, you know, all the things that have ever happened in life. And this is the part where it's like, we need to be able to move the energy through. We don't always have to understand it. We don't necessarily have to speak to it in grand amounts, but be able to support ourselves in the deeper healing, whatever that looks like for you. That is where the gold is. That is the true healing that is available to people. And the way we live our life is through the filter of our experiences. So everything that's ever happened to us, we give meaning. That's what we do. We're meaning-making machines. And so the meaning that we give it is actually the wound through which, or maybe not the wound, it can be the opposite, depending on where in that spectrum, what is the meaning you give to something. When you give something that actually amplifies your life in a positive way, and you've done the work to work through the darkness of anything that's kind of happened to us, then, you know, from there, our body can actually work in a way that is much more amplified. But instead, what ends up happening is we really live in a culture of suppression. I mean, that's oftentimes what the pharmaceuticals do, is they don't really heal it. They have a tendency to suppress it. So we are actually afraid as a country and as humans to feel our emotions. I mean, that's kind of what things do. Anti-fever, anti-pain, antidepressant, anti-anxiousness. Right. You know, all of these pieces that are inside of us are there for a reason. Our symptoms are our most sacred messengers. It's kind of like what I was talking about when I went to the back door of my office and I put my hand on the doorknob and I felt something. That was a message to me. It's like, so when we are curious to this is where the opportunity arises. And so for me, one of the greatest gifts in working with humans is leading them back to this place where they're actually in communication with ourselves. You know, this relationship with ourselves holds all the answers. And it's the same thing in health. You know, when we suppress, when we shut down, when we minimize, when we do all of the things, then that just stays within us. And we try and live our life through these pieces instead of really just taking the time to peel back the layers and allow these pieces to release, to move through our bodies, to be recognized, to be let go of. That's when true healing can happen. So, I think we have a lot of work to do. You know, the way we amplify and our reaction to each other and stuff, this is all signs of this. And bless your heart, I get it. Because there's been a shitload of stuff. Not to mention, you didn't just probably arrive on the planet in 2020. you've lived a whole life. And, you know,
Mhm.
some of what you probably have brought forward in this life wasn't even yours to hold. But like a lot of us, we know we're like put all these pieces on ourselves, and then we go through life and we try and just live this life of, you know, everyone just wants to be happy and fulfilled and all the things,
Yeah.
but we're not really listening to what's going on. So that honestly, the opportunity for everyone is to just slow the fuck down and start
Yes.
attending to what's right in front of you. And you don't necessarily have to know all the answers, but you have to be willing to ask the questions, listen, find perhaps the people that can support you in the process and really respect the fact that it is a process. I think that's where the real freedom lies for a lot of people. You know, we really do think that we are equipped to necessarily handle everything. And the reality is you have a very strong innate understanding. Your body can heal through almost everything, but what it doesn't heal through, it holds on to. And to me, that's the work. You know, it's there for you, but no one's going to do it for you. I mean, that's the side where I say to people, it's like, it's for you. It's
Yeah.
there for you. And I have my own healing to do. You know, so it's like, it's not like any of us are you know, we're going to miss it. It's available for all of us. And that's kind of the piece that I think is coming to the forefront right now. All of this that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard. And also it's an opportunity. You know,
And
I
if
see it with
anyone's
you.
listening and doesn't think that that's true, like emotion in the body, let someone push on your psoas. I guarantee you will feel the worst anxiety, depression, sadness, because they call that muscle like the seat of the soul. Like, why wouldn't you just feel pain? It's
Right.
not pain that you experience when someone presses on that. It is the deepest discomfort on an emotional level. It's wild. That's what we should do. Walk
Vulnerability.
around. You think you're fine? Come here.
How's that feel? Well, I love that though, because you know, oftentimes we do think that things happen to us, right? I mean, this is kind of how it goes. It's like I caught a cold, or you know, I'm a victim of this and a victim of that, and I get it. Some of those diagnoses can be really significant, and yet also there's a, you know, we are all living in this world and we don't all express health and disease in the same way. How we feel physically is not just a result of what we do physically. In fact, the longer I was in practice, the more I recognize it's what goes on mentally, emotionally that
Mm,
shows up in our physical body. This is exactly what you're talking about with the hip flexor, is it sits in your body.
yep.
You know, it sits in your body, but you know, the opportunity's
Mm.
there. Yeah.
I was getting emotional when you were talking about that because I know that recently you've gone back to physical hands-on practice, and I was a hands-on assisting expert. I used to teach it. I touched bodies all day, every day. I touched other people. I'd really get in there. And I was tearing up when you were reminding me about touching bodies and healing. I remember this one day, there was a teenage girl and she had cut marks on her arms. And I just went over and I just put my hands on them. And you just saw like a tear roll down her face. And when the pandemic hit, not only were people too afraid to touch one another, they wouldn't even be around one another. And this practice that I'd made where I was gathering large groups of people together to sweat and breathe and touch each other, that stopped. And that hasn't fully recovered. And, you know, I work from home now and, you know, my own healing, I don't think I've even recouped the power of touch until I met like my new group of Christian friends, this amazing group of women. And whenever they see me, it's the biggest hug. And I'm always surprised just because touch was stolen from us for so long. And yeah, we really haven't fully recovered from that. People are still kind of afraid of one another. And that person to person, hands on is so incredibly healing.
Oh,
And a lot of us have been pushed online and isolated. I'm so
yes.
glad that you're back, bringing back touch.
There's lots of tears on the table, you know, men and women in my practice, and it doesn't even need to be spoken to all the time, but it is that place where we are human connected. We are connected humans. We are meant to be in co-creation with one another in our energy and in life. One of the things I noticed when I went back to Canada was just being in a yoga class and nobody walking around touching anybody. I was like, God, that's so sad. You know, people want to be touched. It sounds so funny to say, but you notice it, you know the power of it. To be seen and witnessed by somebody is the human condition. That is the thing that we want from one another. It's oftentimes why we do what we do on some level. One of the things I noticed down here in Costa Rica is that there's lots of hands-on, and it was weird that it felt weird at the beginning. No, it's strange. It sounds weird to say that, but in yoga, you know, down in yoga practice here, when I'm teaching, I'm all up in people's business. And thank God, number one, yes, exactly. Number one, you know, just on a really logistical side, it is the way to teach in my opinion, in that profession or whatever, in that art. But at the same time too, it's what we all long for. It really is what we long for. And this is us over caring what other people think and what we think is societal rules now. You know, we don't need to follow that. It's just like, this is the part where we tune in. It's like, gift others what you need yourself. And to me, it's like, I absolutely require that heart-to-heart, hands-on touch with other people. It is that important to me. And so, you know, even if there was even this that someone took away from this, it's like, treat others how you want to be treated. And you know, you just watch somebody cough in society, or I've coughed, and I have never felt more weird about coughing. Have you had that?
Oh yeah, you might as well fart. It's better.
It's so weird. Like I cough and all of a sudden I'm coughing into my elbow. I've never coughed into my elbow in my whole life, but it made me realize about how we get told by society through these subtle and not so subtle means about what is appropriate. And there has been a change. And the change is that we don't touch each other. And it's bullshit.
It is bullshit. And this is controversial. In the yoga world, I did not ask permission. And I would tell people, like, expect, this sounds creepy, expect that I'm going to touch you. And everything got very sterile around that time. And there were like permission cards. Yes, you can touch me. No, you can't. And I took the profession very seriously. And if people weren't aligned, right, they're going to get hurt. And I remember this one woman, she was actually in my training, and my trainees especially, I like vigorously handled. And I remember the one trainee saying, if you had asked me permission, I would have said no. And when you put your hands on me, I started sobbing. And I'm so glad that you just did that, because I didn't know how badly I needed it. Just safe, loving, professional, non-sexual touch.
Guidance.
Yes.
Guidance and touch. Number one, I would love to be in your yoga class and your yoga teacher training. I would do that just because I know you're going to touch me. And that is true. And I also think this is this part where we overcare again, going back to that overcaring what other people think. I think that, you know, it's okay to say to people in a yoga class, I'm going to be touching you today. I announce that. But I also think empowering people to just advocate for themselves. If I walk up to you and you don't want me to touch you, just freaking say something. Like, this is the part, right? Like, we have to practice these ways of being true to ourselves, but that's so silly. It's true. Instead of this part where we're like, have to care so much about every single thing, where we don't even feel like we can be soft and ourselves. This is an example of it. It's like, how about we just learn to advocate for ourselves? And this place where we can just say our truth, and you spoke to this already, be able to say the thing that we mean, just unequivocally. That, for some reason, that is being shifted into this place where that's rude or you're obnoxious. It's not. I would rather someone just leads with their truth. And when you lead with your actual truth, it always comes through differently. Like, it always comes through differently. People can feel what that feels like. And I wonder sometimes if this is what we've forgotten, because there's so many rules that seem to be in the world right now about what's appropriate, what isn't. Like, there's this place where it's like, what do you even call people nowadays? I'm like, well, I'm not participating in that. So I'm just going to lead with actual human ways that we speak to one another. And I'm not going to get all up in around all the titles and everything, because I'm not putting energy towards that. People
Yeah.
can feel your heart. It's why you can say what you say. It's like, I know that there's a huge percent of the people that follow you. They're like, fuck, Carla is so bloody ballsy. And and you are, but the reality is you are just being you. Like you are just you know who you are, you know why you do what you do, and you know the cost of not being who you are, which is why you would way rather get over the discomfort of being unapologetically you than to be in a place where you're backpedaling and you are editing yourself and you're shrinking who you are. And this is what a lot of people are drawn to with you. It's like to see someone be in the essence of they are is so damn powerful. It's one of the many reasons that I tune into watching you. It's because like I can see that in you and I see it in myself. And it reminds me of that in myself. And I think this is the part where it's like, damn, yes, like let's do more of this. The other side of I think why I so like following you is you can acknowledge what's going on in the world. And also, can we all be over here creating our life? Like,
Yes.
it can feel like it's all burning, but it's actually not. It's our job as sovereign individuals to say, like, I actually deserve to create a life for myself. So I love how you constantly pull people back to that. It's like, yeah, that's great. The doom scrolling, get over it.
Yes.
You also need to be able to create a life for yourself. You can have a business that can speak to the things that are important to you, that can actually provide income for you and create sovereignty and all of these things. I just think it's such a beautiful thing. And had all those things not happened to you, I mean, I didn't know you back then. I'm sure in many ways, this is just all you in a bigger way, but like, I'm sure that was clarifying for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And if it is all burning down, all the more reason to be giving this everything that you have. Like, no matter what's going on, like, we're all going to be fine, or like something crazy's happening tomorrow, all the more reason to live in the place that you want to live, do the kind of work that you want to do, say the thing that you're supposed to say. Like, there's no circumstance that I can possibly think of where you would want to mute any of that.
Right. Well, I mean, that's it. But also that's the biggest thing is trying to get over ourselves, to be ourselves. It's kind of this strange kind of paradox where, it's like we're afraid to be fully who we are, even though that's what we so desperately want. And we have to, see examples of it in other people to be able to refine that within ourselves. The beauty of all this, though, is that it is pressing people to make decisions about that. When life is easy and like everything's flowing,
Yes.
right? Everything's flowing. It's easy to be all those things when everything's flowing. But as the pressure cooker comes in, the cream rises to the top. You start deciding like, what are my values? What is really important to me? So that's the invitation from you. And that's what I love about what you do. Sovereign CEO, all of it, this place where you're like, listen, I can't just be the person that's teaching everyone to kick ass in business. I want to speak to the other things because that's you living your values. But that's what I think is so powerful. It's not just what you're teaching people, it's what you're mirroring to people. I wanted to tell you that. I'm glad it came up somewhere in this because this is a piece for me where I'm like, fuck yes. And seeing this in somebody else is that reminder back to myself, because this is not foreign concept to me, but the more times I can see this living out loud, the more I can even see it within myself, because we are always in a process of realigning ourselves to our life.
Yes.
Everyone's just talked about the coffee thing. You're like, I know I'm going along and then all of a sudden I'm doing this, but you catch yourself, right? That's what we're always doing about everything. And so it's that beautiful piece where it's like, okay, right, that's how it's done. Even somebody who's like, can look like they're just doing life so perfectly. We're human. There is no such thing. So it's a matter of having these kind of rituals and things that we do in life to be able to call ourselves back to who we are and just recognizing, is this actually a reflection of me? And if not, it's about making a new choice. So this place, and this is where your everyday talk and all the things that you do, it's that reminder back to people. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, this is what I see in yours too, right? We are so multidimensional. You're not just the professional chiropractor. You're not just the soul inspired girl. You're not just the funny person. Like, I love to see you weaving in all of it. All these pieces that you would think, oh no, that doesn't belong. Like, no, actually, it does belong when you are fully embodied in all those different aspects of yourself all the time. That's a human being. What
Hmm.
isn't real is when it's just only one tiny little
Yeah.
glimpse is shown.
Yeah. The heavily created lives, yes. But like when I see things that are heavily curated, I'm always like, I don't understand that. So for me, I just identify with people where I can see all the bits and pieces. I can remember years ago when I was, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8 years into practice, and I had like my professional Laura clothes, and I can't even remember the name of the store, but if I could remember it, you'd be like, oh yes, I know exactly what you used to wear. And I remember being in
Was
practice
it
one
was it
time.
Laura? There's a store called Laura.
Pretty much like it wasn't Laura, but like it could have been Laura. Like it was like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't shoulder pads, by the way, because those were the 80s, but it was definitely like a look, right? I was like business casual in my office. And I had a homeopath in my practice, and she would always wear Birkenstocks and jeans. And like I was the Birkenstocks and jeans girl. So I was like, one day I said to her, I love that you can just wear this to practice. This is what I said to her. It sounds so stupid now. And she looked at me and she goes, why can't you? And I was like, honest to God, I remember going, um, I never
And then
actually freaking
in
thought about
walks
it.
Megan Teltner in her Technicolor dream coat and her Elton John glasses.
Right. Well, that's how I felt, because from that day on, I wore blue jeans to work for the next like 22
Mm.
years, because that was just me. And it's funny that something like that can be, I don't know. Obviously, it's a ridiculous story. And now that I hear it now, I'm like, I can't even imagine why I thought that wasn't possible. But this is what we do, is we set rules for ourselves. We don't even know where they come from. And then we think we need to live by them.
Hmm.
And then someone comes along and goes like, questions that and allows you to question that. And then all of a sudden you can make a different decision. And
Hmm.
so like that little funny, ridiculous moment that literally changed my entire wardrobe for the next 2+
Hmm.
decades has actually been something that has informed me a million times over.
Mm.
It just
Yeah, there's
is.
an
And
energy. Hmm.
yeah. And so it is. It's kind of like, what I'm wearing on the bottom right now versus what I'm wearing on the top in our talk, in
Oh,
the
I'm not
podcast.
showing you what's on the bottom. It's never good.
Well, that's it, right? And I guess that's the latitude that we give ourselves,
Yeah.
because we decide, what are you going
Hmm.
to speak to and what is going to be important to you in the work that you do, the way that you live your life, all of it. It's the uniqueness that we get to have. And I think about some of the people that I really identify with I think this is where our communities have done this over time. It is the unapologetic.
Mm.
It's being unapologetic. And I don't know anybody that doesn't care what other people think. But the difference is
Mm.
we can all care what other people think, but you don't want to over care what people think. And for most of us, and I say this with so much love, is we over care what people think,
Yes.
right? To the point where we would rather disappoint ourselves than disappoint somebody else. And this is the gap between the life that we're living and the life we could be living. So it is that piece where, how we do anything is how we do everything. So how you dress in what you do, I would actually say matters. Practice
Well,
being more of who you are in all the pieces of life.
but I want to highlight one thing. Just like how I said, I love how honest and direct you are while also being kind. I think this last piece is something that some of the unapologetic people miss. So, like when you decided to be more free with your wardrobe, you didn't show up in a dirty sweatsuit all of a sudden, right? There was still a boundary, right? Like I'm wearing my clean jeans and like a nice t-shirt. There was still a boundary. And I see that when you're speaking as well. You are not going to hold back on what you think about health protocols, but you're not mean. And I don't know about you, but this is like the work that I'm constantly on with myself to be honest, but
Mm,
the way we say things matters almost more than what we say than what the thing actually is. Like how we deliver material is really, really important because there's a lot of people in the space right now that are just yelling at everybody and they're like, well, it's
Mhm.
just me. It's this fuck you energy. And fuck you energy is not healed. It's not.
Well, no, it's not. I know what you're talking about. I see it sometimes, and because I think, shaming people never brings out the best in them. It's just like one of the lowest vibrational energies that exists in society. And, most of us can shame ourselves better than everybody else. So when you see somebody else shame somebody, it really speaks to that for people. And if anything, you're going to get the opposite response from the person. So when we speak from that level, it is our own wounding, that the work we've yet to do comes from that. And, rightfully so, I get it. But that's the piece too, where when we practice speaking our truth, it is a practice. And
Mhm.
sometimes when people come from a place where they never spoke their truth ever, and then they're learning to speak their truth, they come like a blowhorn. So I feel like there's an integrated wisdom piece that can come from it. And it's far more, I mean, it's easier on the person that's communicating it, but I
Mhm.
also think it is a learned skill that comes from doing our own work. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I sound like a blowhorn. I definitely do. There
Same.
are times, right? That is
Mhm.
everything to me is a practice, always. It's always a practice. Um, but you do what matters most to you. I just don't want to be spoken to like that. And so I don't
Yeah.
resonate with it. And I try and speak to something that I could hear in anything,
Mhm.
whether it's a patient on my table or it's somebody in my practice or it's in a retreat or whatever. It's like I would like to lead with what I would like to receive, but I also don't want to diminish what that person needs to hear or what I believe that person can hear.
Yep.
To me, that's the serving part. It's like I want to share what is coming through me because I think it's important for that person or it's an opportunity. Whether they receive it, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just leading with my heart. And this is the thing I think a lot of us recognize in other people. It's like when people lead from their heart, you can say the most honest thing and it's not going to come across as shaming or judgment or any of those things because that's not where it's coming from inside of you.
Mm.
So that is a really big compliment that you would say that that's something that you see at times in me because it's something that I always want to embody.
Mm.
Like what's the point of saying it if you're just shaming someone else? And believe me, I've shamed people before and it's shitty.
Mhm.
And I'm super sorry that I've ever done that, but is definitely probably my biggest work at this point in my life is if I'm going to be of service, I'm going to be of service to myself and I'm going to be to service and to the person in front of me. And the only way that I can do that is to lead with love. I had this beautiful experience of going to Dr. Kevin. I know you know who he is, Kevin Preston.
Mm.
I went to, it was called Regeneration. It was a 3-day event in October in British Columbia. Charles Eisenstein and Dr. Zach Bush were speaking there. And I don't know if this was the intention or what just came through as a result of the crowd, the energy that was there because they spoke multiple times over 3 days. And it was this energy of forgiveness.
Mm.
And, I don't know exactly why I'm speaking it to right now, but it has been something that has sat with me because it's not really something I've thought about a lot,
Mhm.
is this energy of forgiveness. And in so much divide that's happened in the world, it's like, how do we ever bridge this together? Because we all want the same thing. We just all think the way to get there is different. We all have a different
Yep.
way. And I was able to hear things I've never heard before
Yep.
through these two particular humans, 3, Kevin included,
Mm.
because of how they lead with their heart. So to see that
Yes.
and feel that, I love it. I can't think of anything that we could do more beautifully if we're open to the challenge.
Mm. And maybe we can't do that on our own. Maybe that's where we need to actually invite in higher power, God. I heard a minister the other day talking about this election that's coming up, and he said, I'm going to pray for the person that I want in that best represents my value system. And whoever wins, I will pray for them. Whoever wins, I will
Um,
pray for them. And it was this like, ooh, a little self check for me to make sure that I am praying for my enemies as well. or someone that I have othered, that they're able to have a change of heart or do the right thing. And that, like, what a check of like my own tribalism too.
Mm.
If the person that you didn't agree with, if they suddenly did the right thing, could you then love them? And a lot of us would probably say no, like, no, you just want your side no matter what.
Yeah.
And again, not healing, not healing.
Yeah, that is actually really powerful. I mean, I'm not American. If I could vote if I was in America, I could vote in the American election, as we've all talked about.
I don't
But
think we need ID. Let's go. We could go
right?
and vote.
True, we could. But instead, because I can't, or I'm choosing not to, let's go back to that. I'm choosing not to. One of the things that a few of us here, none of us are Americans, I thought, like, what are we doing on Tuesday morning? To me, I'm holding an energy. Call it praying, call it whatever you want. I am holding an energy that we see this through for the highest good of humanity. Isn't that all? Isn't that what we all want?
Yeah.
You know, and maybe if had I not just been at that event in October, similar to what you're saying, had you not heard that minister saying what he said, the resonance for me was, what is the highest? What is it that we ultimately want? And how do we feed that? How do we lead with that more than anything? And for me, that's what it is. So it's like, yeah, okay, I do have a candidate that I want to win. And also, I want what's greatest for humanity. Because to me, that is the macrocosm. That's the thing that is overarching all of this. It's you know, I really appreciate where religion meets together with love, like the human heart. When we can bring these pieces together, and I know for you, or I sense for you, with things I've heard on your podcast and in your socials, is just for you this return, or this coming into relationship with God, and how you have spoke to that into the world. And it's actually been something that's warmed me to a new way of looking at the world. So again, a lot of times we're afraid to say the thing, not you necessarily, but a lot of people are afraid to talk about politics, afraid to talk about religion, afraid to talk about certain things. It's like, yeah, but if you use it in the energy that's coming straight from your heart, and this is the theme that's coming through, you can literally shift something for other people in the way that you would want, right? Just by living it yourself. It's a beautiful thing.
I think you identified exactly how we stay in that space. Like you said, like you just came from this 3-day event with Dr. Kevin Preston. We have to keep doing those things. You know, like you run retreats to help people like be in that energy.
Yeah.
We have to constantly fill ourselves up with the right things, because if we don't, because we're human, we get knocked off course so easily. Like I know I'm a completely different person depending on what podcast I'm listening to, depending on what content I'm listening
Consuming.
to, reading. If I'm on Twitter all week compared to going to church, like there's a totally different Carla that immerses from that space. One is very angry, one is very forgiving. Has running retreats been important to your own healing journey? And what are you seeing from other people as they start to immerse themselves back into this like in-person experience?
I think that, you know, I ran retreats well before this. It's probably been about 10 years, but there's definitely a different call to action that's coming through in the retreats that I've held, you know, since 2022. And the biggest thing that I get is, I knew I needed this. I just didn't know how much. You know, it's kind of like you said about you know, you put your hands on someone and they would have said no, but they didn't. And as a result, they couldn't believe the difference. It is that. And there is something about gifting yourself a pause and immersing yourself in something. So like going to that event, spending 5 days or spending 7 days in a container, let's just call it, in a space, in an energy, in an intention with other women, because I host women's retreats, there is definitely a strong portal that comes through, and it offers up so much. So there's always a theme that arises. We can set a theme as facilitators. I try and tap into the field as best I can. And I think that's part of what co-creates. And then that intention on my part calls in women into that space. And then those women, and you know this from other things that you've led, they are exactly the right women that are supposed to be there. And as a result of that, I just think that you can move mountains in moments in a way, right? It's that being seen and seeing each other, holding space and receiving, like there's just a lot of potency there. And for women especially, and I do work with men in one-to-one retreats, but in that potency together, I think that women can let go of things that we don't even know we're holding, because there's a particular way that a lot of women move through the world, myself included. There's a huge amount of empathy that women have. And as a result, we hold on to things that aren't even ours. So this work for me has been the most unexpected pleasure. It pushes me in ways I never imagined. It blows me away of what can happen in a retreat experience. It feels like I have been gifted with the biggest gift to even be able to do it. And I stress just before it starts. And then afterwards I cry because I can't believe what happened. So it's like, you know, it's like those things where you set the tone, you set the opportunity, but it's always a co-creation of the people that came. So I have no clue if that's what you were just asking me, but I just went off on a, like, this is what it's like for me to be doing retreats. It's such a gift, such a gift.
I think people are craving that right now. I think so many people have hermited the last few years, and they understand that it's time to touch and be with people and to travel. And even with the crazy things going on, they're like, I gotta live my life.
You can't
I
stop
have to
living your
live.
life. I actually did that. I found myself, when I moved to Costa Rica, I hermited in, and I was afraid to leave the country without knowing that I was afraid to leave the country. And then I recognized that how disabling that was for me. And so I went back into the world of starting to travel again, and I found myself more again. Honestly, that's what it is. And so I find that too. There's this trepidation about saying, yes, we have a retreat coming up in Costa Rica in April. And, you know, for some of the people in our world, they're like, oh, what's the world like going to be? It's like, I don't know. I don't know. And also time passes, right?
Yep.
Think about how much time passed already. Just keep moving forward. Like that's, to me, that's just keep doing it, because time is going to pass regardless of what you choose. You might as well choose yourself. I just think it's the kind of thing we never regret.
Tomorrow is uncertain, has always been the case.
This is
That's
true.
not new to 2024. And I was just talking with a good friend today whose father was just diagnosed with a really, really harsh illness, and he doesn't have much time. And he had just retired, and they were saving for this time to go and do all the things. And you know, he's just going to make every moment count now, and he's going to travel. And I was talking with her about like this, our own trip that we've booked. So we're going to Thailand for a month. And
Amazing.
it's right around this like election, like wars, all these things. And it feels weird, but at the same time, I'm like, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I could have
It
a
is
brain
weird.
aneurysm. I don't know. Tomorrow
Right.
is uncertain, has always been the case. So I'm just gonna go and live. Maybe I'll end up at your retreat. We'll see.
How amazing would that be for me? Yeah, I love that you're doing that. And again, it comes down to, you know, deciding for yourself how it is that you want to live your life, and then following through with that. That's the aligned action. So
Mhm.
I'm really, you know, I'm celebrating the fact that you're doing that. You're doing it in a family. You're never going to regret it. It'll be the best thing you ever did. And I know you know that, but you know, it's the same thing. And so for those women who are, you know, I get a lot of fence sitting right now. You always get fence sitting when it's when you want to say yes to anything, whether it's like a container of some sort, a business program, a retreat, whatever. There's this place oftentimes where we sit there and we go, should I, shouldn't I, should I?
Mhm.
But I just say, like, the fact that you're sitting right there says something. And, you know, take an action, say yes, move forward, whatever it is. I think it's one of the most powerful things that we can do. And it also breaks the stagnation of energy that's just sitting there, right?
Yeah.
Like that stagnant energy of like things aren't moving, things aren't happening for you. Make a choice, just decide something. It'll start to move the energy and clarity will come from it as a result of it. Best thing you'll ever do.
Or the stagnant energy of I'm just going to sit and wait because something bad might happen. What an awful energy to just immerse yourself in.
Oh, I've done that.
Yeah.
I know that energy. I did it for a while. You know, like after I left practice and I moved across the country and so on, I just went, took, you know, and I was like, need to get some rice and an extra freezer. And I did all that kind of stuff. And then I sat there and then I was like, oh my God,
Now what?
Oh, turns out this is not as fast as I thought it was going to be. So I need to actually like move forward with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I do not want to be standing here in 5 years from now waiting for the apocalypse. I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it. Not working for me. And like you said, a million things can happen between now and then. And I think one of the best things you can do is to live your life with enthusiasm and energy and all the things. Yeah, be smart, be sovereign, you know, be independent, do all of those things, build the most fucking awesome business for yourself, strengthen your relationships, do all the things, but go have fun because life is not waiting for you. And if you truly want to change the energy of what's going on in the world, be the biggest expression of you. You could not do anything more powerful than that. That's for sure.
I'm ending there because it can't get any better than that. That's the line.
That's the line. Your dog in the background. Are you kidding me? Look at his little bum.
Little butt. Oh, Laura, where can people find you? Where can they find out about this retreat? Where's the best place to go?
I'm going to throw you a link. So I suspect it might end up in the notes, but also you can find me at soulinspiredgurl.com, GURL, both on Instagram. And that's also my URL. And yeah, just reach out, throw me a DM, find me through my website. Love to meet up with your community. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's been such a gift. Such a beautiful
Thank
gift.
you. I loved this. I love this time with you. I really appreciate your time and definitely will make sure everything is linked up in the show notes. And yeah, I just look forward to meeting you in person one day.
It'll happen.
Been underground, now I aim for the sky. Don't quit now, you can last longer. All these wounds only making you stronger. Don't give